Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving into Indian psychology,
Okay.
which is a pretty fascinating topic, right? I mean, it's ancient, but still so relevant to how we live today.
Absolutely.
And we'll be using this book, Foundations and Applications of Indian Psychology, to guide our exploration.
So
we can really get a grasp on how this unique field of study views human experience and how we gain knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, it's interesting how Indian psychology kind of flips a lot of the assumptions we make in the West about psychology.
Right.
It offers a totally different way of looking at ourselves and the world around us.
That's what I'm excited to dig into.
Yeah.
I was reading how the book emphasizes the idea of consciousness, but not just as a brain function, It's suggesting that consciousness is a fundamental reality, like the foundation of everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty mind-blowing concept when you think about it.
Right.
And from that understanding of consciousness comes the whole holistic approach that Indian psychology takes.
Okay.
Like it views the mind, body, and spirit as interconnected.
Oh, so it's not just analyzing our thoughts and actions like we tend to do in Western psychology.
No, not at all.
Interesting.
It's about understanding the whole person, the whole intricate web of connections.
Between our inner and outer worlds.
Exactly.
And is this interconnectedness what leads to those big goals of Indian psychology, like self-realization and liberation from suffering?
Absolutely.
So it's not just about fixing what's wrong,
No.
but about realizing our full potential, right?
Truly living a fulfilling life. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see how this all connects. And speaking of a fulfilling life, the book mentions these purusharthas, the 4 aims of life.
Right.
Could you break those down for us a bit?
Of course. So the 4 purusharthas are dharma, artha, kama, and moksha.
Okay.
So dharma is all about living righteously, ethically, fulfilling your duties and obligations.
Got it.
Artha is about, pursuing wealth and material security, but doing it ethically in a balanced way.
Makes sense.
Then there's kama, which is about desire, pleasure, enjoying all the beauty and richness life has to offer.
Yeah. Okay.
And finally, moksha, which is the ultimate aim.
Okay.
It's about achieving liberation from suffering and the cycle of birth and death.
Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's reaching a state of enlightenment or self-realization.
So it's not about focusing on just one thing, like wealth or pleasure.
Right.
It's recognizing the importance of all these aims together.
Exactly.
Indian psychology is really big on this idea of balance, huh?
It is.
It's like a roadmap for living a meaningful and well-rounded life.
A holistic view
Totally.
of what a good life really means.
I'm really digging this framework. But how does this system approach knowledge itself? How do we actually come to understand the world and our place in it?
That's where the pramanas come in.
Okay.
Pramanas are the sources of valid knowledge in Indian thought.
Got it.
One of the key ones is pratyaksha,
Pratyaksha.
which is direct perception. Basically knowing through your senses, experiencing the world firsthand.
So like how an apple tastes like an apple, you take a bite and
Exactly.
It makes sense.
Simple. Right.
But we don't always rely on just our senses for knowledge.
Right.
We use logic and reasoning too.
Of course.
So how does that fit in?
That's where anumana comes in,
Pranumana.
which is inference.
Okay.
Like when you see smoke, you infer there must be a fire somewhere.
Right.
We're drawing conclusions based on evidence.
So we have direct perception and inference. What are the other pramanas?
Well, there's upamana, which is comparison or analogy.
Okay.
We learn new things by comparing them to what we already know.
Like saying, oh, it's kind of like this other thing you're familiar with.
Exactly.
Oh, that's what's relatable.
Yeah. And then the 4th one is shabda,
Shabda.
which means verbal testimony or relying on reliable sources.
Okay.
This could be knowledge passed down in scriptures, teachings from wise teachers, or even, scientific research that's been rigorously tested.
So it seems like Indian psychology really values learning from trusted sources.
It does.
Yeah, but the book also mentions this intuitive mode of knowing.
Right.
It's not about our senses or what we hear, but something we experience directly.
Yeah, it's called anubhava.
Anubhava.
Which is like intuitive experience.
Okay.
And it's really important for understanding Brahman.
Brahman.
Which is, the absolute reality, the ultimate source of consciousness.
So it's about having this direct experience of reality.
Yeah, a moment of insight where the knower, the known, and the process of knowing, they all become one.
Wow, that's a lot to process.
It is. It is.
It's like going beyond just thinking about it and actually experiencing truth.
Exactly.
But how do we actually cultivate that kind of knowing?
Well, the book talks about 3 paths to knowledge.
Okay.
Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Karma Yoga.
I've heard those terms before, but could you explain them a bit for our listeners?
Sure. So Jnana Yoga is the path of knowledge.
Okay.
Emphasizing intellectual understanding, self-reflection, really using your mind to inquire into the nature of reality in your true self.
Okay, so that's Jnana Yoga.
Then there's Bhakti Yoga, which is the path of devotion.
Okay.
It's about seeking union with the divine through love and surrender, practices like chanting or prayer.
I see.
And finally, there's Karma Yoga, which is the path of action.
Okay.
It's about finding liberation through selfless service, fulfilling your duty, acting in alignment with your dharma, all that.
So Indian psychology recognizes that there isn't one right way to knowledge or spiritual growth, right?
Exactly.
But these different paths cater to different people and their inclinations.
Right.
But they all aim at reducing distortions of perception.
Yeah. They help us to
see reality more clearly.
Exactly. They help us to move beyond our limited egocentric views and connect with a deeper understanding
Of ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly.
I'm seeing how these ancient principles could apply to modern psychology
Yeah.
and maybe even our own lives.
Absolutely.
But before we get into that, let's explore another fascinating aspect of Indian psychology. It's models of personality.
Okay. Sounds good.
One of the most impactful is the Buddhist model based on the 5 aggregates, also called skandhas.
Right.
And it offers a powerful framework for understanding the illusion of a permanent self.
Yeah. It's pretty radical.
Instead of seeing ourselves as these solid, unchanging beings, it breaks down human experience into 5 elements that are constantly interacting and changing.
Yeah. It really challenges how we think about who we are.
It does. Can you explain these 5 aggregates a bit more?
Sure. The 5 aggregates are form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Okay, let's break those down.
So form refers to our physical body and the material world around us. Sensation is our experience of the world through our senses. Sights, sounds, smells, all of that.
Okay.
Perception is how we make sense of those sensations. Mental formations are our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, habits, all the stuff we create in our minds.
Okay.
And consciousness is, well, the awareness that experiences all of it.
So it's like instead of a fixed self, it's more like these 5 elements interacting and always changing.
Exactly.
They're more like a process than a fixed thing.
Think of it like a wave in the ocean.
Yeah.
It has a form, it moves, but it's not separate from the water itself.
Right. I see.
In the same way, our sense of self is always changing, shaped by our experiences.
So this is connected to the Buddhist idea of Atman, no self.
Exactly.
By understanding that the self isn't permanent or separate, we can start to free ourselves from suffering that comes with clinging to a fixed identity.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty radical idea compared to, how we usually think about ourselves in the West.
It is. It is.
Yeah. It's a completely different way of understanding self and identity.
Yeah, it's a whole new perspective.
So before the break, we were talking about this idea of Atman.
Right.
Or no self, and how it challenges the way we in the West usually think about ourselves as, fixed and independent selves.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It seems almost like paradoxical,
Right.
If there's no self,
yeah,
then who's having these experiences?
That's the core of what Indian psychology is getting at.
Okay.
It's not that we don't exist or that our experiences aren't real.
Right.
But it's saying that our sense of self is more fluid and interconnected than we think.
Okay.
Imagine your mind like a smartphone with all these different apps running.
Yeah.
Each app is like a skandha. They're all interacting to create your experience.
I see.
But the phone itself isn't you. It's just a tool.
Right.
Same way the self isn't a separate thing, but a process of these elements interacting.
That's a really helpful analogy. It makes this abstract concept a little easier to grasp.
Yeah. I like that one.
So if we let go of this clinging to a fixed self, does that mean we're also letting go of personal responsibility?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Indian psychology actually emphasizes personal responsibility even more.
Really?
Yeah. If we understand that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for for everything around us,
Right.
then we become more mindful and compassionate.
That makes sense.
It all comes back to this interconnectedness.
So it's not about dissolving into nothingness, but
Right.
becoming more aware of how we're all connected and acting responsibly within that web.
Exactly.
And this brings us back to Dharma, right?
Right.
Living ethically, fulfilling our duties, acting in alignment with our true nature.
It's not just about following rules or what society expects of us.
Right, it's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's about this sense of purpose and right action.
So how does Indian psychology view emotions?
Interesting question.
In Western psychology, we spend a lot of time trying to understand and manage our emotions.
You do, we do.
So what's the Indian psychology take on that?
Well, it recognizes the power of emotions,
Okay.
but it doesn't see them as something to suppress or control.
Interesting.
Instead, it emphasizes understanding where our emotions come from
Okay.
and transforming them through, mindfulness, meditation, those kinds of practices.
So rather than trying to get rid of negative emotions like anger or sadness,
Right.
it's about understanding their root cause and transforming them into something positive.
Yeah, think of it like anger, for example, can be a powerful force for good.
How so?
If we understand where it's coming from and channel it the right way,
Can you give an example?
think of Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh, okay.
He used his anger at injustice to fuel a nonviolent movement.
Right.
That's powerful.
It is. It really shifts our perspective. Instead of seeing emotions as something to be afraid of, we can see them as potential sources of energy, maybe even wisdom.
And that leads us to the role of spirituality in mental health.
Okay. How so?
A lot of the practices like yoga and meditation,
Right.
they're not just about relaxing or de-stressing.
Okay.
They're about cultivating a deeper connection
To what?
to our true nature, our inner source of peace and wisdom.
So it's not just fixing what's broken,
Yeah.
but connecting with a sense of wholeness.
Exactly. Indian psychology recognizes that true healing needs to address every aspect of ourselves.
Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual.
All of it.
This is really expanding my understanding of mental health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
But how about applying these principles in modern settings like psychotherapy?
Right. The book has some good examples of that.
It does.
Yeah, there's more and more research looking at how things like yoga and meditation can work with Western psychotherapy.
Oh, interesting.
For example, studies show that mindfulness-based therapies are really effective for anxiety and depression.
So these ancient practices are being validated by modern science.
They are. And it makes sense when you think about it.
Okay.
A lot of the techniques in mindfulness therapies are rooted in ancient Indian practices.
Vipassana meditation.
Exactly.
I see how these two worlds can come together then for a more holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
But the book also mentions applying these principles in the workplace.
Right.
That's pretty out there, isn't it?
It might seem unusual, but there's a lot of interest in what's called spiritual climate
Yeah.
in organizations.
Spiritual climate.
Yeah, it's about creating a work environment that fosters meaning, purpose, and interconnectedness.
Hold on. Are we talking about bringing spirituality into work?
In a way, yeah. How does that actually work?
It's not about imposing specific religious beliefs or anything like that.
Okay.
It's about creating a culture that values authenticity, compassion, ethical behavior,
Right.
recognizing that employees are whole people.
Not just cogs in a machine, exactly, with their own needs and aspirations.
So it's about creating a work environment that aligns with those principles of Dharma and interconnectedness we've been talking about.
You got it.
And does this actually work?
Well, studies show that organizations with a strong spiritual climate
Okay.
tend to have happier employees, less turnover, and they even perform better financially.
Wow. That's impressive.
It seems that when people feel a sense of purpose in their work,
Yeah.
everyone benefits.
This is making me think differently about my own work. It's not just about getting things done,
Right.
but creating an environment that nourishes us,
Exactly. And that's where the real power of Indian psychology lies.
Oh, okay.
It's not just theories. It's about transforming our lives.
And the world around us.
Absolutely.
I'm ready to dive into some real-world examples now.
Sounds good.
The book mentioned some compelling case studies, right?
It did. One striking example is the Chipko movement in India.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Refresh my memory. What was that about?
I can't quite recall the details.
It was a nonviolent movement back in the 70s.
Okay.
Villagers, mostly women, they literally hugged trees to protect them from being cut down.
Wow.
It's a great example of how Indian psychology principles can be used to tackle social and environmental problems.
So it wasn't just an environmental movement then?
No, it was spiritual and cultural, too.
How so?
It drew on deep-seated beliefs about the sacredness of nature
Okay.
and the interconnectedness of all beings.
They weren't just fighting for their livelihoods. They
Right.
were standing up for their values, their connection to nature.
Exactly. They saw the trees as part of their community,
Wow.
living beings deserving of respect.
That's powerful.
They even called upon local deities and performed rituals to connect with the forest.
It's amazing how they combine spiritual beliefs
Yeah.
with ecological awareness and activism.
It's a perfect example of the principles we've been talking about.
It really is a testament to the power of Indian psychology.
It is. It's truly inspiring.
Are there other case studies that show these practical applications?
There are.
Okay.
The book also looks at the work of a traditional healer in India, Sri Ramachandra Bapuji Ambedkar.
Okay.
He was known for healing all kinds of ailments, using herbal remedies, spiritual practices,
Interesting.
and a deep understanding of his patient's cultural background.
So he was using a holistic approach,
Yes, sir.
recognizing that healing isn't just about physical symptoms.
Right. He understood that illness can come from imbalances in the mind, body, and spirit.
Right, and his methods addressed all of those levels.
Exactly. He was drawing on the wisdom of traditional Indian medicine and spiritual practices.
I see. So he was blending those two worlds.
And his success shows how powerful that integration can be.
It reminds us that there's so much wisdom in traditional healing systems that often gets overlooked in the West.
And this brings us to another case study you might find interesting. Mirambika.
Narambika.
It's a school in India inspired by Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga.
I've heard of Sri Aurobindo, but not this school.
It's really remarkable.
What makes it so unique?
It has a completely different approach to education.
Okay, how so?
It focuses on the holistic development of each child.
Okay.
Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, the whole package.
So it's not just about academics?
No, not at all.
Interesting.
It's about nurturing each child's potential,
Okay.
fostering creativity, critical thinking,
Right.
and a deep connection with themselves and the world.
Sounds like a dream school.
Doesn't it?
How do they actually do that?
They use all sorts of innovative methods,
Like what?
experiential learning, nature-based activities,
Okay.
artistic expression, spiritual practices like yoga and meditation.
Wow. So they're really creating a learning environment aligned with those Indian psychology principles.
Exactly. And the results are amazing.
How so?
The kids who go to Mirambika,
Yeah.
they're not just academically successful.
Okay.
They're well-rounded, compassionate, deeply connected to themselves and the world around them.
That's incredible.
And they even have a unique approach to discipline
What do you mean?
instead of punishment.
Right.
They focus on understanding why a child misbehaved,
Oh, wow.
helping them learn from their mistakes.
That's a really different way of thinking about it.
It is.
It's like they're creating a more humane and holistic learning environment.
Precisely. It's a model that could inspire educators all over the world.
I love that.
Yeah.
These case studies are really inspiring. They show that Indian psychology is not just a bunch of ideas. It's a living tradition with real-world applications.
It can change lives.
And the world around us.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring the world of Indian psychology.
We have.
From Atman to Dharma to power of yoga, we've uncovered so much.
It's been
It
fascinating.
really challenges how we think in the West.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm curious, how can we apply these ancient principles to the challenges we face today? Climate change, social divisions, political turmoil. Right.
It seems like we've lost that sense of balance and interconnectedness.
You're absolutely right. And I think Indian psychology offers a powerful antidote to that fragmented view,
Right.
which is causing so much suffering,
Right.
It reminds us that we're not these isolated individuals, but part of a larger web.
Yeah.
It encourages us to cultivate harmony.
Not just within ourselves.
Right. With each other and with nature.
That's definitely a message we need to hear right now.
It is.
But it can't just be about reading books and having these discussions.
You're right.
How do we actually live these principles?
It's about embodying them,
Okay.
integrating them into our actions.
So living in alignment with our values.
Exactly.
Cultivating compassion, understanding, and taking responsibility.
All of it.
That sounds challenging.
It can be, but the book offers some guidance
Oh,
through the concept of yoga.
yoga, but not just the physical posture.
You're right. Right. It's more than that.
Great. It's a whole system. Ethical guidelines, physical practices, mental disciplines, and spiritual practices.
All aimed at achieving that state of union and harmony.
Exactly.
So it's about aligning our thoughts, words, and actions with our values, being more mindful in everything we do.
It's about cultivating that inner peace and clarity,
Yeah.
which then can ripple outwards into our relationships, our communities.
That's okay.
And that inner transformation, that's essential for creating a better world.
So it's a personal journey that contributes to collective change.
Exactly. It all connects.
I'm starting to see how it all fits together.
Yeah.
By understanding our interconnectedness, cultivating inner harmony through practices like yoga,
Right.
we can begin to heal that fragmentation that's causing so much suffering.
It's not just about our own growth.
Right.
It's about the evolution of everyone, everything.
This deep dive has been amazing. It's given me a whole new perspective on psychology, on spirituality, on what it means to live a good life.
That's great to hear.
It's given me hope that we can build a better world.
Yeah.
One that's more just, more compassionate, more sustainable.
I'm so glad.
As we wrap up,
Yeah.
what would you say are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think it's about finding what resonates with you most from these ideas.
Okay.
How can you bring the wisdom and practices of Indian psychology into your own life?
Yeah.
How can you cultivate more harmony within yourself, in your relationships, in how you interact with the world?
Those are powerful questions to consider.
They are.
And I encourage our listeners to do just that.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
Keep seeking.
And keep seeking that deeper connection with yourselves and with the world around you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for being here today.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, until next time, keep diving deep.